within the Taiwanese American community around me, also because of the history and the progress that Taiwan has been making. Looking back at democratizing Taiwan in the 90s and then looking at the peaceful transition of power in 2000, 2008, 2016, and then think about like the Sunflower Movement, watching that abroad, and then also watching the Marriage Equality Act and seeing how democracy at work in Taiwan, how the progress is making. It's just building so much pride for Taiwanese Americans abroad. And of course, then when you think about your heritage and you're proud of it, then of course that coincides with increasing pride in Taiwanese American identity.
With this growing identity, there has also been hostility from those who identify as Chinese, as we've seen with the Laguna Woods incident at the Taiwan Presbyterian Church.
I just want to highlight the incident last May. It also happened during the Asian American Heritage Month too. And as Taiwanese, we also established the first week of May as Taiwanese Heritage celebration as well. So it's very poignant that it happened in May, but the shooter went to the church, a Presbyterian church, which had a long history in is part of the Taiwanese democracy movement too. So all these elements playing together, it was very, it would definitely influence and really impacted our community, and it was a great tragedy. And as part of the civic engagement director team at Taiwanese American Citizens League, that we wrote a statement, and I like to read part of it to highlight that day and why we chose the Taiwanese Strong as a hashtag, as a rallying point for us. So for the audience, it's choking me up a little bit. In the midst of the tragedy, we herald the bravery and quick thinking of Dr. Chen, the pastor, and the congregants who subdued the shooter and prevented the death of even more people. It is preserving that this sort of bravery should be even, it's perverse that this sort of bravery should even be necessary, but it is a statement to the selfless and strength of the Taiwanese people. And you think about how that identity being Taiwanese is so tied to democracy ideals now. And then you see the juxtaposition of Chinese identity. It really is a reminder how the courage and the legacy that we choose to follow could mean life and death sometimes.
Has this incident actually strengthened the Taiwanese American identity or the Taiwanese identity in the United States?
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, the idea around Taiwanese Strong is a reminder of where we have been and the hope that we can continue to go toward. Even with the tragedy like this, that reminds us of what we're made of. We're from the legacy of people who choose courage and choose to do the right thing when it counts the most.
Speaking of gun violence, the U.S. has seen more than 60 mass shooting incidents since the start of the year, and that's only about over a month. Why is there so much gun violence, and what's the stark difference between the two democracies, Taiwan and the U.S.?
You have people who are saying gun control, which makes sense that because if you look at the statistics around the world, Americans, private citizens own twice the amount of guns per 100 people compared to the next country. But off and on, the wealth and the abundance in the United States actually exhibits in many forms, right? But also includes owning guns. But on the other hand is that there is a lot of instability and inequality and probably a lot of lack of social safety net in the United States as well that is increasing, that's fomenting this need for people who actually want to commit this crime, and also mental health too. There is another segment in the statement from actually from last year, during the shooting at the Presbyterian Church in May last year. So it's interesting to look at it historically. According to the Gun Violence Archive, the shooting in May 2002 of our community, this was the 201st mass shootings of 2022, and that was last year in May, so compared to this year. So we're on track. So out of 2 mass shootings as of the morning of May 16, 2022. And we wrote that this is a heartbreaking and staggering statistics which no one wants to be part of. And it comes actually as a no surprise that it would eventually touch more closer to home, like last year in May, and then this year during the Lunar New Year celebration in Monterey Park. I'm sure audience in Taiwan has heard of that shooting. And then the subsequent 2 days later of another shooting in Northern California. And I'm sure people are paying attention because that's where a lot of Taiwanese live too. I look for Taiwan, and Taiwan's number is 0. In a lot of ways that Americans are still shocked, and I'm hoping that people are not going to be just thinking this is business as normal, and it's still waiting for a point of sort of a change in terms of general policy on guns, or a much larger scale of legislation or policy that can deal with this. But in the meantime, yeah, it's something to watch for, looking at how Congress or the government or policy-wise trying to balance this idea of the right to bear arms, your freedom to do so, versus the freedom to feel safe, versus the freedom to not be shot.
Do you feel there's room for change in this gun culture as it started, as you mentioned, it started with the founding of the United States?
It's a sweet spot when you think about how you can use different freedoms and make them not juxtapose each other, right? Because I suppose not everything in life is absolute, but there's a happy medium point that you're right to, there's always a tension, even in freedom of speech, in the First Amendment, that there is later on founding through the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court also interprets what the founding documents meant compared to the law. And so people sue when there's law that they think is not constitutional. That's what it means. And there's a founding document. And you think about how the right to bear arm is supposed to be something that is not infringing on other people. It really wears that sweet spot, then maybe it's more responsibility, right? And I joke a lot how that comic books can also be very quotable as well, as maybe not as highbrow as the Constitution, but you think about Spider-Man, great privilege comes with great responsibility. And it's the same thing here. If we enjoy certain freedom, it is some freedom, like it's intrinsic. We ought to have freedom, and we should allow individuals to flourish, and it's good for the society and it's good for human progress. But at the same time, that it comes with certain responsibility. So it's not exactly saying that is curbing a freedom, but it's treating the freedom with the respect that it deserves.